What makes a British war film unforgettable? The answer isn't just in the battles or the uniforms, it's in the grit, the wit, and the quiet defiance that defined a nation under fire. Some of these films were shot with limited budgets but limitless heart, and while others became legends, a few quietly slipped into public archives waiting to be rediscovered. So, grab your tea, dim the lights, and prepare for 12 British war classics that still echo with courage and cinematic brilliance. Number 12. The Steel Bayonet, 1957. If you think desert warfare is all sand and shouting, The Steel Bayonet will change your mind. This lean, fiercely focused film drops you straight into North Africa, where a small British unit must defend an observation post against German forces closing in from every direction. There are no glamour shots here, just heat, sweat, and silence before the storm. Director Michael Ralph captures the suffocating tension of being cut off from command. Every scene feels like a ticking clock, and you can almost taste the dust in the air. The film's strength lies in its realism. No dramatic speeches, no slow-motion heroics, just men trying to survive one more hour under an unforgiving sun. Jack Hawkins anchors the cast with understated power. His leadership feels authentic, firm, flawed, and deeply human. What's remarkable is how the film blends strategy with character study. You see soldiers wrestling not just with the enemy, but with their own fear and exhaustion. Though made on a modest budget, The Steel Bayonet punches above its weight. It's the kind of movie that reminds you bravery isn't about glory, it's about endurance. By the final reel, you're left with the eerie quiet of the desert and the echo of courage that costs everything. A hidden gem from the British archives that deserves far more attention than it gets. Number 11. Zulu, 1964. Before superhero blockbusters, there was Zulu. A true epic born from history's chaos. It recreates the Battle of Rorke's Drift, where roughly 150 British soldiers held off thousands of Zulu warriors in 1879. The odds were impossible, and yet what unfolds on screen feels almost mythic. Directed by Cy Enfield, the film doesn't rush into the fight. It builds tension like a drumbeat in the distance. When battle finally erupts, the choreography is breathtaking, each volley of gunfire set against sweeping music and the haunting rhythm of Zulu chants. But what makes Zulu endure is its complexity. It's not simply a story of one side's triumph, it gives dignity to both. The Zulu fighters are portrayed with discipline and pride, not as faceless foes, but as warriors defending their land. And yes, this is the film that introduced a young Michael Caine to the world. His cool, upper-class swagger contrasts perfectly with Stanley Baker's rough-edged authority. Their dynamic turns the story into something more than a military legend. It becomes a portrait of class, courage, and respect forged under fire. When the smoke clears, Zulu leaves you exhilarated yet thoughtful. It's big, bold, and impossible to forget, proof that you don't need modern effects to create cinematic thunder. Number 10. The Lion Has Wings, 1939. Imagine a film made while the war it depicts is just beginning. The Lion Has Wings is part documentary, part drama, and entirely a rallying cry. Released in 1939, it was Britain's cinematic call to arms made before the Battle of Britain even began. Starring Merle Oberon and Ralph Richardson, it opens with scenes of British life in peacetime before shifting to the looming threat across the Channel. Real Royal Air Force footage mixes with dramatized scenes of pilots preparing for combat, creating a strange hybrid that's both propaganda and prophecy. What's fascinating is how quickly it was produced script to screen in under 3 months. It was cinema as national morale booster designed to tell audiences, "We are ready." Today, it feels like a time capsule of British spirit. Critics later called it dated, but that misses the point. The Lion Has Wings isn't about polished filmmaking, it's about urgency. You can feel the fear and resolve of a country staring down uncertainty. It's less about explosions and more about endurance. Watching it now is like hearing a voice from 1939 whisper through the decades. We didn't know what was coming, but we stood tall anyway. Number 9. Convoy, 1940. Naval warfare rarely gets the spotlight, but Convoy brings the sea to center stage. Set in the cold waters of the North Sea, it follows a Royal Navy crew escorting merchant ships while German U-boats lurk below. Released in 1940, it gave audiences both suspense and reassurance the Navy was out there holding the line. What sets Convoy apart is its balance of action and humanity. Amid the tension of depth charges and sonar pings, there's humor, friendship, and the occasional heartbreak. The officers and sailors aren't cardboard heroes, they bicker, joke, and doubt. That authenticity makes every moment feel earned. Director Penn Tennyson, an up-and-coming filmmaker whose career was tragically cut short during the war, imbues the film with striking realism. The ocean scenes were shot using real ships, and you can almost feel the spray and chill of the sea. For 1940 audiences, Convoy was reassurance wrapped in entertainment. For modern viewers, it's a rare look at how British cinema captured duty without grandstanding. It's understated, but that's precisely why it hits home. The danger isn't shouted at hums beneath every wave. By the end, you'll realize Convoy isn't just about ships or battles. It's about the invisible lifelines that kept a nation alive. Number 8. King and Country, 1964. If most war films show bravery on the field, King and Country turns its gaze on the quiet tragedy behind it. Set in the trenches of the First World War, it tells the story of a young soldier accused of desertion and the officer assigned to defend him. What unfolds is one of the most haunting anti-war statements in British cinema. Directed by Joseph Losey, the film unfolds almost like a stage play, tight spaces, dim lighting, dripping mud. The claustrophobia isn't just physical, it's moral. As the defense officer, played by Dirk Bogarde, begins to see the system's cruelty, the line between justice and survival blurs completely. Every conversation in King and Country feels heavy with unspoken truth. It exposes the emotional cost of conflict not through spectacle, but through silence, confusion, and quiet despair. When it premiered in 1964, audiences expecting action were caught off guard. Instead, they got a brutal kind of honesty. This wasn't the glorified version of heroism. It was the one that questions what heroism even means. The film's power lies in what it refuses to do. It never preaches. It simply shows you a world where good men are crushed by rules they can't understand. By the closing scene, the word duty feels like a wound that won't heal. It's a war film stripped of glamour, leaving only truth behind. Number 7. The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp, 1943. Here's the masterpiece that critics now call the greatest British war film ever made. The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp isn't just a movie, it's an emotional odyssey through decades of friendship, loyalty, and change. Written and directed by Michael Powell and Emmerich Pressburger, it follows Clive Candy, an aging officer whose life spans 3 wars. You watch him transform from young idealist dueling in 1902 to graying veteran questioning everything by 1943. The film's structure is daring. Flashbacks, romance, humor, melancholy. It feels more like a novel than a movie. Roger Livesey's performance as Candy is so genuine, you almost forget you're watching fiction. Deborah Kerr, playing 3 separate roles across time, ties his journey together like memory itself. When it first premiered, some military officials disliked its sympathetic portrayal of a German officer and its gentle critique of blind patriotism. But decades later, those same qualities make it timeless. It understands that real courage isn't about shouting orders, it's about compassion, even for one's adversary. Visually, it's stunning. The Technicolor glows like memory itself, and the cinematography still outshines films made half a century later. By the final scene, you're left with a lump in your throat and a strange feeling of gratitude for the reminder that honor means adapting without losing your soul. Number 6. The War Game, 1966. Few films have ever rattled a government. The War Game did exactly that. Made by Peter Watkins for the BBC, it was so realistic the network refused to broadcast it for nearly 20 years. Why? Because it didn't show soldiers charging across fields, it showed ordinary British citizens caught in the nightmare of a nuclear attack. Shot in black and white with documentary precision, it's presented like a news report from the end of the world. Streets crumble, homes burn, and humanity itself becomes the casualty. Watkins used non-actors from Kent to deliver gut-wrenching realism, and the result was terrifyingly believable. It wasn't fiction, it felt like prophecy. When it was finally released in theaters, audiences sat in stunned silence. Critics called it too real to bear. And yet, that's exactly what gives the war game its power. It forces you to see war not as distant strategy, but as something that could arrive on your doorstep. Despite being banned from television for years, it won the Academy Award for Best Documentary. That irony says it all. The film was too true for comfort. Even today, its grainy images hit harder than any big-budget spectacle. It remains a haunting reminder that sometimes the most powerful war film doesn't show soldiers at all. It shows the people left behind. Number 5. The Way Ahead, 1944. Some war films show heroes. The Way Ahead shows how they're made. Directed by Carol Reed and written by Eric Ambler and Peter Ustinov, it follows a group of ordinary British civilians conscripted into the army and transformed through failure, humor, and grit into a real fighting unit. The brilliance of the film lies in its evolution. At first, these recruits are hopeless. They stumble, complain, and botch every exercise imaginable. But as training grinds on, camaraderie grows. By the time they face combat, they've become something bigger than themselves. David Niven leads the cast with effortless charm, balancing authority with empathy. His performance carries warmth and wit qualities often missing from wartime cinema. And while The Way Ahead was made as morale-boosting propaganda, it transcends that label. It's funny, touching, and surprisingly honest about the frustration and fear behind duty. Visually, Reed gives the story documentary realism long before it became fashionable. Mud, exhaustion, and banter feel authentic, not staged. The humor never undercuts the message, it amplifies it. These are men learning not just how to fight, but how to trust. By the final scene, as the once ragtag platoon heads into action, you feel proud not because of victory, but because you've watched them earn their courage the hard way. The Way Ahead isn't just a film, it's a blueprint for resilience. Number 4. In Which We Serve, 1942. If The Way Ahead captured the soldier's journey, In Which We Serve captured the sailor's heart. Written, directed, and co-starring Noel Coward with David Lean assisting behind the camera, it's one of Britain's proudest cinematic achievements. The story follows the crew of the HMS Turin, a destroyer struck during the war. Through flashbacks, we see not just battles at sea, but the families, friendships, and heartbreaks that define these men's lives. Coward, known more for wit than warfare, surprised everyone by turning in one of the most stirring performances of his career. He plays Captain Kinross with quiet dignity, a man who leads by example, not by shouting orders. The film's structure was groundbreaking. Instead of linear storytelling, it weaves time and memory, showing how home and front lines mirror one another. Wives wait, letters go unanswered, and yet hope endures. When In Which We Serve premiered, Winston Churchill himself praised it as the spirit of Britain on film. For audiences in 1942, it wasn't just entertainment, it was reassurance that decency could survive disaster. Even now, it stands tall not as propaganda, but as poetry. Every drop of sea spray, every salute feels earned. It's not just about ships, it's about the people who refused to sink even when everything else did. Number 3. The Dam Busters, 1955. Few films define British ingenuity like The Dam Busters. Based on the true story of the daring Royal Air Force mission to destroy German dams using bouncing bombs, it's a triumph of suspense, scale, and stoic humor. Director Michael Anderson turns what could have been a dry procedural into something exhilarating. Richard Todd plays Wing Commander Guy Gibson, a man obsessed with precision, while Michael Redgrave portrays Barnes Wallace, the inventor whose idea changed the course of the war. What's fascinating is how the film balances pride with tension. Every technical challenge becomes a story in itself, building the bombs, testing their bounce, perfecting the angle of attack. It's science turned into high drama. When the Lancaster bombers finally take off, the film's pulse quickens. Even without modern effects, the flying sequences remain breathtaking. You feel the weight of risk in every shadow and reflection. Released just a decade after the events it portrays, the Dam Busters carried emotional gravity audiences knew these were real men, many of whom never returned. Its theme music by Eric Coates became an anthem of British valor. Some films shout their importance. The Dam Busters doesn't have to. It's precision filmmaking about precision flying, and it still soars. Number 2. Q Planes, 1939. Before James Bond or John le Carré, there was Q Planes, a playful spy adventure that mixed espionage with wartime suspense. Released just before the outbreak of the Second World War, it follows a series of mysterious disappearances of experimental aircraft and the eccentric British agent sent to investigate. Laurence Olivier plays a dashing test pilot, while Ralph Richardson steals the show as a dry-witted intelligence officer who treats danger like an afternoon inconvenience. Their banter gives the film surprising lightness for its era. What's remarkable is how prophetic Q Planes feels. The plot about secret technology and aerial sabotage eerily foreshadows the espionage reality Britain would soon face. It's also one of the first films to capture the cool, quipping British hero who would later define an entire genre. Though made on the eve of global conflict, it never feels grim. It's brisk, clever, and visually stylish, combining comedy with tension in ways that would later inspire Ealing Studios and early spy thrillers. Watching it today is like uncovering the prototype for the modern action spy template, complete with gadgets, coded messages, and unflappable charm. Q Planes isn't just a relic, it's a time capsule, showing how Britain laughed in the face of oncoming chaos. Number 1. Hellboats, 1970. By the dawn of the 1970s, the golden age of British war cinema was fading, but Hellboats refused to go quietly. Set during the Second World War and shot in Malta, it follows the daring missions of British torpedo boats targeting enemy supply ships in the Mediterranean. While not as famous as The Dam Busters or In Which We Serve, it captures a grittier, more modern tone. The action feels immediate, the characters sharper, and the stakes more personal. James Franciscus leads with quiet determination, supported by a cast that balances camaraderie with conflict. The film's production values are surprisingly high for its time. Real naval vessels were used, giving the sea battles an authenticity that puts later studio recreations to shame. But beyond the spectacle lies something deeper, a sense of transition. By 1970, war films were evolving. Heroes weren't flawless anymore. They were conflicted, weary, and human. Hellboats stands at that crossroads, bridging classic stoicism with a new realism. It may not have the prestige of the earlier classics, but that's what makes it a perfect closer for this list, a salute to the unsung films that carried the British war tradition into a new era. If you've never seen it, this is your hidden harbor. And there you have it, 12 British war classics that prove courage doesn't fade with time. Whether it's desert grit, icy seas, or moral battles in muddy trenches, these films show every shade of bravery imaginable. So cue one up, settle in, and rediscover the spirit that shaped a generation of cinema. Which one will you start with? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more hidden cinematic treasures.